And on to debate number 2. Today, the Uniform Civil Code Bill was tabled in the Uttarakhand Assembly, and amongst other talking points of the bill was live-in relationships and its legal recognition. Once the bill gets passed in the Assembly, it will make it mandatory for couples living in Uttarakhand and live-in relationships to register themselves. This rule will not only apply to the citizens of Uttarakhand but also to residents of other states residing in Uttarakhand. Those who fail to adhere to the rules will face a jail term of up to 6 months and a fine of 25,000 rupees or both. As per the Uttarakhand UCC, a woman who's been deserted in a live-in relationship can approach the court and is entitled to claim maintenance. A child in a live-in relationship will be declared legitimate child of the couple under the UCC provisions. However, there's been a mixed bag of reactions on the issue. Some have in fact called for a major reform or called it a major reform, keeping in mind the reality of relationships in modern days. However, some have called it an intrusion on the personal space of individuals. Listen in.
हमको कहते हैं बुनियादी चीज गलत है। हाँ, जो धर्म के हिसाब से उसके हिसाब से करो, कोर्ट में जाओ, करो, लोगों को गवाह बनाओ। ऐसा नहीं है कि कुछ दिन मजे उड़ा दिए और उसके बाद जो इधर चला गया उधर चला गया और मर्डर हो रहे। पिछले 5 साल में मेरे यहाँ से दिल्ली में 5 बड़े-बड़े मर्डर हो चुके, जिसका मामला आज तक है।
देखिए क्या है कि ये तो बेडरूम में घुसने की साजिश है। आप किसी की निजता में घुसना चाहते हैं, तो जब भी कोई वारदात बढ़ती है उसके संबंध में कानून लाया जाता है। लिव इन में ऐसा कौन सा, 2 लोग अपनी सहमति से रह रहे हैं, आप कौन, आप क्यों कूदना चाह रहे हैं उनके बीच में?
लेकिन इत्तेफाक से जो उनका बच्चा पैदा होगा, उस बच्चे का दोष क्या है? उस मासूम बच्चे का दोष क्या है? तो अगर जो लिव इन रिलेशनशिप को रजिस्टर्ड करके उनके द्वारा जो कभी बच्चा पैदा होता है उसको सम्मान दिलाना क्या किसी के बेडरूम में झांकने वाली बात है?
If anybody is below 21, we already have laws for that. This is interfering, impinging into citizens' private lives.
You know, I would call some of the sections of the UCC absolutely bizarre. They go against so many observations of the Supreme Court. In fact, they go against the law of this land, the domestic violence bill.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
And for more of this, let's go right across to our guest. Joining us with us is Kasturi Shankar, actress. Deshradhan Nigam, lawyer, is with us. With us also is Karuna Nandi, senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Kunika Sadanand, actor and advocate, joins us from Mumbai. We also have Shilpi Jain, lawyer, joining us from the national capital. Karuna Nandi, let me start with you first and foremost. There are those who will say that this provision of registering a live-in relationship also provides a certain amount of security, particularly to the woman partner, in terms of maintenance, in terms of rights of the offspring, in terms of, we've seen in the past Supreme Court intervening when it comes to aspects such as domestic violence. Why would you object to such a provision being there in the first place?
Because of the criminal provision. The rest of it is perfectly legitimate. It's perfectly legitimate to say that if there are 2 people living together and it is a marital-like relationship, right, or if they live in a shared household, then the Domestic Violence Act applies in any case, and maintenance can be claimed in any case, so that's already in existence. There's no such thing as an illegitimate child in that sense, right? Those days are gone. What this law, I think a lot of people are finding a bit bizarre on, is that it seems to say that if you fail to register, it doesn't seem to say, I mean, this is what we have, that if you fail to register it, you can be imprisoned. I mean, frankly, that's a prima facie nonsense. And if you want sort of citations of Supreme Court judgments, there is the constitutional bench in Puttaswamy, which says that honor cannot be a part of constitutional decision-making with regard to intimate choices that you make, bodily autonomy and freedom.
Okay. Would you like to respond to that, Deshradhan Nigam, that ultimately it's about the privacy, it's about 2 individuals and the choices that any adult or any 2 adults might make? Who is the state to come in and introduce criminal provisions for not adhering to what they consider as a violation of the law? In this particular case, this could also, many fear and many have been expressing on social media, lead to a lot of unnecessary harassment and intervention by the government.
Well, Madhav, let me make it very clear. This is about prevention of crime
and also ensuring rights of the intimate partners. It is both ways. Now, suppose many people live in a relationship, suddenly one of them vanishes. You don't even know who that person is. You can't even trace that person. He commits a crime. It's very difficult to catch. If you recall, we had that Shraddha's case in Delhi. In fact, CCTV cameras and lot of hunt came in. Then the person was recognized, such and such person. In the case of registration, the identity state is not going to, come into your room, look inside your room what you do. But in the event of an eventuality of a crime being committed, a person can be taken to task. And even Supreme Court, through various catena of judgments, have already treated it like a marriage. And criminal provisions is to the extent of 6 months because you fail to register. And this will, once you register, the subsequent chain is established which will prevent subsequent crimes from happening. Not that the crime will take place. Suppose it takes place, how do you catch a person? The woman is left high and dry, the domestic violence takes place, and you can't even trace the person. In some cases, even the identity is hidden. And you live with a different name. So these are about, rights of the women and also of the men who live in an intimate relationship, and also prevention of crime. We require a comprehensive law. Okay. The law is so scattered through Supreme Court judgments. You do require a comprehensive law, and this is only penalty for non-registration, so that future crimes and future, happenings or untoward incidents can be prevented.
All right, let me bring in Shilpi Jain on that note. Shilpi Jain, do you accept what's being stated here by Deshradha Nigam? Because he says, and he's not entirely factually untrue, there have been horrific crimes that have taken place in Delhi, in Mumbai and other parts of the country where one partner has acted very violently, murders even having taken place, and therefore there's a huge difficulty in trying to identify or crack down upon the accused. It's only to prevent that, says Deshradha Nigam. How do you respond, Shilpi Jain?
See, when there is a legal relationship, which is a formal commitment recognized by law, we call it marriage. When the couples choose not to make a social declaration of their marriage, or not to give each other the same rights or responsibilities which a married life brings, they may choose to have a live-in relationship. Now, if you want to give a live-in relationship exactly the same rights and responsibilities which a marriage will give, what is the difference? Now, as of now, even if two people are married, they can privately marry in a temple, and we don't need to necessarily register it or inform the state about it. Now, this is a knee-jerk reaction, and where they take it to another level, a live-in relationship, where you need to take your boyfriend or girlfriend to the registrar and say, look, this is my boyfriend and this is my girlfriend. And worse, when you break up, then again you go to the registrar and say, yes, now we are breaking up. It's like the state peeping into your bedroom, into your hearts. Where is the privacy? And supposing a couple has a live-in relationship and a breakup, say 3 or 4 times in 3 or 4 years, every time he goes with his partner to the registrar, who is the registrar to, be told that I am in a relationship. It's a choice I make. And if I use my right not to enter into a relationship or marriage, that's a personal choice. I don't want to, and as far as the children being, given some special rights, they are already live-in relationship is recognized that children are legitimate. Even under Domestic Violence Act, they are entitled to maintenance. And it is totally contrary to the spirit of the law and the courts in the present times. Okay. Adultery has been decriminalized. So what are they talking about? There's a Lakshman Rekha which I don't think needs to be crossed. Okay. I am against the requirement of declaring your relationship to the registrar, and also the penal provisions. Okay, two very important points. Kasturi Shankar, why have these penal provisions? This is a Lakshman Rekha being crossed, and this is like the state peeping into your bedroom, says Shilpi Jain. Please respond to her on these 3 counts.
I want to actually add to what Madam Shilpi Jain said, and start by saying, while I agree with the intention of the law, of the proposed law to protect unofficial relationships, because yes, We have had women chopped into pieces and found in refrigerators. So, it's a huge process to actually link everything together. But that said and done, the first question that comes to mind is in a live-in relationship, which obviously the couple does not want to formalize, which is why it is a live-in relationship in the first place. They want to have a degree of flexibility. Even registering it when you are all happy and you are a couple in love is all very fine. But when you need to go terminate it, ek to nahi aayega. One of the two will not show up at the registrar office. This is more harassment. It is more of a process. It is going to be a pain for the authority involved. It's not feasible. It's not practical. I think the penal provisions need to be done away with and they have to be made optional. And when you make it an option, trust me, there will be a lot of women who do take it up. And it has to be made unilateral also. There should be maybe a signature from your significant other. And it should not be that they have to come to a registrar office. Because at the end of the day, while we make a clear distinction between illicit relationships and a consensual, legitimate relationship, the reality of today's society in India is that many of these couples don't want it to be known to their family, or they don't have their family's approval. There is a lot of social context to this. And then you are compelling them to have a quasi-marriage, which can be short-term, and then they have to go through the ignominy of announcing to the world that they were in a relationship that they are no longer in. I think that is really not the way to effect social reform, number one. And number two, where does this leave the LGBTQ community? A lot of them are in live-in relationships, and I'm sure they would want some kind of legal recognition to them as well, because marriage as yet has not been given to them as a right in India. So maybe this is something that we should look at in more.
I think that's a pertinent question. Deshwatan Nigam, would you like to take that question? Because she says, what happens to the entire LGBT community? There is a lot of issues pertaining to them as with others, and also a lot of points with the penal provision. You can bring in such a law, but is it correct to, give 3 years jail or 3 months jail term to somebody who doesn't register? Isn't that going a bit too far?
Well, Madhav, let me point out one thing straight away. So far as LGBTQ plus rights are concerned, the assembly has the right to make it. But that call is to be made by assembly. If they think, if somebody can bring the bill and if it can be passed, and if there is a sufficient pressure on the legislators, the law will come. If it is not there, the law will not come. It has happened in the case of Parliament. Certain rights were given by the Supreme Court. Now, penal provisions. Suppose you take away the penal provisions and make it optional. Nobody is going to, believe me, following the arguments given on this panel, there will not be any registration, maybe few. Then how do you prevent a crime? This is about prevention of crime, which is increasing day by day. And to catch the culprits. How do you then catch the culprits if the person cannot be even traced? Please give me an answer to that.
Okay. Kurika Sadhanu, would you like to comment on that?
I would like to say a few things, if you can give me the chance. I have a few problems with this. The specific is the wordings of the act. If one is married, what about if somebody has a pending divorce and the person wants to live in with somebody because he knows he's going to get a divorce or she knows she's going to get a divorce? Don't you think this will open up the other that person towards ransom or blackmail? Like, that is one thing. Because the other person will know, okay, they're in a live-in relationship and I'm not going to give a divorce. Second thing is, I think this, where it says that it will have to be registered, they can change it and say, instead it should say or should read as, they may register. So let the person choose whether they want redressal if in case of something happening. Now, everybody has said, especially Mr. Nigam has said that, to prevent crimes, there is laws against murder, there's laws against rape, there's laws against domestic violence. Have we prevented it? To prevent it, we need a sensitized society. We need a police that acts. We need people who accept people's choices. We need a society to accept people's choices. And also, I want to ask you that why, the compliances in like in domestic violence, when you get an order the compliance of that order is so difficult. Maintenance, when a woman she gets maintenance and the divorce in the family court, she has to keep running back because the husband refuses to pay. So we should be working on these existing laws and consolidating them.
Quick response is a lot more that's really needed. What's really needed is to reform the system rather than bringing in these fresh reforms. While the reforms, the idea of them may be laudable, but the practical implementation is going to be very difficult.
Can I just come in here briefly?
Yeah, okay. Karuna wants to respond to yes.
Crime.
Yeah.
Just because somebody is registered as a partner and then commits a crime doesn't mean that there's any deterrence whatsoever. The problem when a crime is committed in a live-in relationship or in a marriage is not that the person cannot be identified. The partner who the crime has been committed against obviously has the capacity to identify the person. In the tiny minority of cases where the partner is no longer alive to identify the person, if there is a live-in relationship, there will be people around who can identify the person. Identification is not the problem.
Okay, got your point, but we're completely out of time. I'm so sorry, we're completely out of time. Wanted to come to you for a quick response, Deshrat Nigam, but completely out of time. Kasturi Shankar, Karuna Nandi, Kunika Sadanand, Shilpi Jay, Deshrat Nigam, thanks so much for joining us. One of the biggest talking points coming out of the UCC announcement today in the Uttarakhand Assembly, and perhaps you haven't heard the last word yet. Will there be any further amendments as far as it becoming law is concerned is a big question indeed. But for the moment, thanks so much for joining us this evening.